My name is Richard Alders, and I will be doing a presentation on hedonism. Before we get started, hedonism at the very fundamental level is the pursuit of pleasure and the aversion of pain. Various men throughout history discussed their outlook on hedonism. One of those men is Aristotle. Aristotle discusses happiness in the second chapter of the History of Psychology textbook. He believed that happiness is based off of fulfilling one's life purpose, and that is through thinking rationally. But he also understood that humans are biological organisms. He believed that, like animals, humans are motivated by appetite, which appetite is something that needs to be satisfied, such as hunger and thirst, that provides a positive sensation when fulfilled. If a behavior following the existence of an appetite is fulfilled, then pleasure falls as a result. Aristotle also believed that humans are able to inhibit their appetites using rational ability. In Chapter 3 of the textbook, Epicurus of Samos and his views of hedonism is discussed. He believed intense pleasure should be avoided due to inconveniences that occur as a result. An example of this is drinking. Moving to Chapter 5, Hobbes is the first empiricist that is discussed. He believed that sensory experience is important and had an hedonistic view of what motivates people. Hobbes associated words with pleasure and pain. An example is a person could associate romantic passion with pleasure and depression as an aversive. Hobbes tied this into morality and thought that morality was not objective. A person could be presented with several aversive or pleasurable options to them and choose the pleasurable ones, and he also did not think that there is free will in this decision-making process. Locke is the next empiricist that is discussed in Chapter 5. He believed pleasure and pain stemmed out into emotions, such as fear and love, and also believed that the senses are responsible for emotional experience that follows. Locke's belief explains how someone who has a very observably difficult life can theoretically have a more pleasurable one than a person whose mind is plagued by aversive thoughts. Hume also talks about motivations for behavior. Hume talks about how a passion, that being an emotion, becomes tied with an idea and results in a behavior. He does not believe reasoning results in a behavior. If a person were to experience pleasure towards an idea, they would behave as a result. An example of this is a person experiencing pleasure for the diet instead of just knowing the rationale for having the diet. The person who experiences pleasure will likely commit to the diet. Alexander Bain viewed hedonism as a motivation for behavior. If an action is spontaneous, if the person has a pleasurable association, then the behavior will likely be repeated. James Mill was primarily an associationist who had a hedonistic outlook on the vividness of an idea. He also believed utilitarianism justifies a libertarian ideology. Hedonism applied to politics basically summarizes what utilitarianism is. Jeremy Bentham applied hedonism to his political and ethical beliefs. He thought that the government should bring the greatest amount of happiness to the most amount of people. He also came up with a hedonic calculus, the calculation of pleasure and pain for an outcome, to his political beliefs as well. John Stuart Mill, the son of James Mill, agreed with Bentham on utilitarianism. However, John Stuart Mill disagreed with the idea that all pleasures were equal and valued intellectual pleasure more so. Auguste Comte was following a doctrine called positivism. He had various beliefs on many things, but in regard to hedonism and utilitarianism, Comte valued the happiness of a group far more than the happiness of the individual. John Stuart Mill disagreed with this stance heavily. Pierre Gassendi shared Epicurean beliefs on hedonism. He thought that these ideas of intense pleasure being avoidable resulted in people conducting themselves better. Condillac asked his readers to imagine a statue that can perceive, remember, and feel, but can only smell. The statue can smell a continuous odor, regardless of it being pleasurable or aversive, then the statue would not have anything to compare it to until it can smell another odor, then make it a comparison, and then have the judgment of whether an experience is pleasurable or aversive. Lastly, Helvetius entertained the thoughts of British empiricists often, took a look into the idea that knowledge comes from experience. In regards to learning, he saw it as being able to reinforce behaviors or thoughts that had value and not reinforcing the ones that didn't.